so tired of smoking cessation. We've had it like 4 times, 5 times. I still don't understand it. I still don't understand when to fall off, for what age, and how to.
Doing that. All right, before we get started, any questions? Everyone able to locate your old, IP3 resources? Yes. All right, cool. All right, so first, application.
Conversations for Change.
Go ahead and read this.
The 5 A's and tobacco cessation. This video is produced by the Behavioral Health and Wellness Program in the School of Medicine at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, with funding support from the Smoking Cessation Leadership Center, SCLC. This video demonstrates the 5 A's, a brief, evidence-based intervention which allows healthcare workers to talk with patients about tobacco cessation efficiently and effectively. Tobacco dependence and use is a chronic relapsing condition that requires repeated interventions and a systematic approach. The 5 A's are ask, advise, assess, assist, and arrange. In this video, you will follow a provider as she works with a patient to stop smoking. The first A is to ask about tobacco use. The goal is to ask about the patient's current tobacco use and explore their tobacco use history. Asking about past quit attempts can help to identify what did and didn't work in previous quit attempts. This information gives the healthcare provider what they need to help a patient to quit. Let's see what this looks like in action.
Hello, Darian. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Before we get started, I just wanted to check in with you about a few things. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
So I see from your chart that you are currently using tobacco. What can you tell me about your tobacco use?
I'm down to about a pack a day now. I started cutting back ever since my sister died of cancer last year. She smoked for 30 years, and the doctor said she would have lived longer if she didn't smoke. I smoked for almost that long, and I'm scared about what it's doing to my health.
30 years is a long time. You say you've smoked almost that long? How long have you been a smoker?
About 28 years now.
Wow. So you were a young man when you started. Why did you start smoking?
It was the cool thing to do. If you didn't smoke, you weren't tough. And in my neighborhood, if you weren't tough, well, that was a problem for you. So I just started smoking just like everyone else I knew.
Well, it sounds like you're aware of some of the negative health consequences from using tobacco. But
Hey, those got me
what
going
is it
pretty
you're
good.
scared of?
He had a pass.
Well, my sister died of throat cancer, and my parents died of tobacco use too. My father had a heart attack, and my mother had lung cancer. I just don't want to suffer like they did.
That sounds very scary.
And with my kids growing up, I don't want them to end up in the same boat.
And you want to be a good role model for your children.
I do. I don't smoke in the house because I don't want them exposed to it. But they know that good old dad smokes. They tell me to quit all the time. In fact, my daughter made a poster about the negative effects of tobacco use for school, and she made sure to show it to me before she turned it in.
And have you ever tried quitting smoking?
Yeah, I went a whole summer once without smoking.
My preceptor did that to me.
Then I started again when the kids went back to school. I used a patch that time, but I didn't like it. It gave me weird dreams and made my skin itchy.
Some forms of nicotine replacement therapy work better for different people. Aside from the patch, have you tried anything else?
Yeah, I've gone quite a while just going cold turkey. Mostly after my kids were born. I went a couple of months both times. But then something happened to stress me out enough to where I just went back to it.
As you can see, just by asking Darian about his tobacco use, we gained some valuable information. We learned that he is currently smoking a pack a day. He has smoked for a long time. He is scared about possible health consequences, and that he has had some success with quitting in the past. Notice that the healthcare provider gently guided him to share more information without being negative or judgmental. This likely helped Darian to open up about his tobacco use. The healthcare worker now has a lot of information that will help her create an effective quit plan specific to his situation. Now, let's move to advise. The second A is to advise. People who use tobacco should be strongly advised to quit in a way that is positive, supportive, clear, and personalized. Be sure to express concern for the person's well-being, letting them know that you are committed to helping them quit when they are ready. Research shows that when healthcare providers advise patients to quit, patients are up to twice as likely to quit for more than 5 months than patients who were not advised to quit.
Well, it sounds like you've had some success with quitting in the past.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, stopping smoking is the single best thing you can do to improve your health. And as your healthcare provider, I strongly recommend it, especially in light of your sister's recent death.
All right, so team number
I hear
one,
you.
why did you not pick A?
Here, we see the healthcare worker advising Darian to quit in a strong, clear, and personalized manner. Even though her message was strong, she did so in a way that allowed the patient to hear her concern. Now let's move to the third A, assess. When assessing a patient, you'll want to explore their readiness to change. To do so, it's helpful to find out whether they're ready to make a quit attempt. One quick, effective way to do this is to use a change ruler. When using a change ruler, begin by asking the patient to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all ready to quit using tobacco, and 10 being ready to stop using tobacco right now. Once the patient has rated themselves, it is helpful to discuss why they chose this particular rating instead of a lower number. This way, we can learn why a patient wants to quit, as well as the barriers that may stand in their way. Also, assessing the patient's level of nicotine dependence will help healthcare workers refer patients to the resources that meet their needs. Let's see what assessing looks like with Darian.
I know that I want to quit, but I'm just so scared. I failed last time, and if I fail again, think I might just give up.
Who chose D? Alright, why do you
Plus,
guys
it's just
choose
so
D?
hard to quit. But I know I'm only hurting myself by continuing to smoke.
So,
Okay,
on one hand, it sounds like you're scared to quit because you don't know if you can do it. And on the other hand, you're aware of the negative health consequences and want to
Okay,
quit
because
so you
the
can
drug
live
interaction,
a
you guys
longer
will
and
be-
healthier
and
life.
you guys
Is
will-
that right?
you want to do
Yeah.
non-pharm first?
It's just so
Okay,
hard.
drug interaction. Okay.
So it
what-
sounds like your previous experience is acting as a
Okay.
barrier to your
What
quitting
other
right now.
reasons do you have
I don't wanna
for
fail again,
choosing or not
you know?
choosing your
Well, quitting smoking can be hard.
Sorry, Jan.
You know, in order to get a better sense of your readiness, let's talk about a scale. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not ready and 10 being very ready to quit smoking, where would you put yourself?
Okay, alright, so potential
Well, I know that I wanna
childbearing
quit.
age, you
I'm
wanna
just not
go
sure that I
with
can.
a,
So I guess I would put myself at
So you went with
about a 6 on that
10%.
scale.
Oh,
Alright,
okay,
so
great, a 6.
real
So,
quick, what
why are you at a
the
6 and
categories for
not at
all
a
the
4?
products here?
Well, I know that I
Are
want
they all
to
the
quit.
same or are they all different?
If I said that I was a 4, then I would just be saying that I want to quit without doing anything about it.
Okay. Does
My
anyone
kids.
who agrees
If they
that
started
your place
smoking,
in this
I don't even
category
think I
raise
could
your
tell them
hand?
to stop because I smoke. And I don't want them out there
People-
thinking that that's
people
okay.
Who
That
disagrees
makes a lot of
that it's
sense.
D?
So tell me, what would need to
Everyone else
change in your
feels like it's
life in
something else
order
that's
to
not
get
D?
you to an 8?
Or what do you guys think it is?
Well, an 8 would be great.
Your D, I hear C.
I guess I would have to start thinking
Alright,
about
people that
quitting.
chose,
You know,
says
coming up with a
category
plan
C
that would
for
work for me.
NRTs.
I would want the support of my family and friends, and I would tell them about the plan and ask them to put up with me for about a week or so.
Who said? Oh,
And I would
sorry,
really
here's
want to
C.
learn about the medications that are available to me, so I don't have to use that awful patch.
Okay,
For
so
NRTs, not for
you can pretty easily identify supports and actions you can take to move yourself to an 8 on this scale.
Yeah, I guess so.
Alright, if you chose D, what's
I mean,
the source and what is it?
I would want to quit, and I would be able to start by making some of these changes.
My notes, my handout. Alright, well, what is?
As you
what
can
is the
see,
more purpose
when
of
assessing
the
a
handout?
patient, it is important to reflect change statements so that you can check understanding
Alright,
and
Briggs,
summarize the
yeah.
patient's
Use
ambivalence.
Briggs, see what that says. Alright, you use any other validated.
The fourth A is to
drug
assist
information
patients to make a plan for
source
change.
that could, be right or wrong. Alright, so
Every
here's the thing, right?
individual
It's
will
actually
have
based
different quit
for
plans and
NRTs.
goals.
Some will say you need
If the patient is
supplementation.
ready to
However,
quit,
the reason is
make the message
because
personal
prescription
and specific to each person's situation.
are E,
Listen to their story and let them know about their options.
OTCs.
Healthcare workers can talk about setting a quit date or gradually cutting down, depending on the specific needs of the patient. It can be helpful to explore the pros and cons of both options so they may make an informed decision.
For some patients,
You should also explore potential barriers to quitting, such as concerns about withdrawal symptoms and weight gain. Finally, encourage individuals to talk with friends and family about their desire to quit so they can get the support they need. Let's watch how this healthcare worker assists Darian.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to talk with you about nicotine replacement therapy today, as well as some behavioral supports that we offer. We can also spend some time talking about how to ask family and friends for support through this process. How does that sound to you?
Sounds great.
Pill is more, they just feel better taking a pill. Okay. Other times, maybe it's
Here,
cost
the healthcare worker assists Darian to access resources that will be helpful in his quit attempt. She helps him by sharing information about nicotine replacement therapies, as well as going through some scenarios that may assist him in speaking with his loved ones about his upcoming changes. The fifth and final A is to arrange. Once the patient and healthcare worker have decided on a plan, it is important to arrange a follow-up meeting to check in on their progress. Tobacco users who have follow-up appointments are much more likely to quit or sustain their quit attempt. Some healthcare workers may have more time to spend with patients and therefore have the ability to work more closely with them around tobacco cessation, while others only have a few minutes to spend with each patient. Regardless, Setting up follow-up appointments is an effective way to help patients with this change. Healthcare workers should continue to talk with patients about potential barriers to quitting or staying tobacco-free.
Alright, so
It is important to congratulate all successes, even small ones. Changes like reduction in daily use or avoiding smoking in difficult situations are reasons to celebrate.
Okay, let's meet again in 2 weeks and we can talk further about your readiness to stop smoking. That'll give you some time to think about medication options and talk with family and friends. And at that time, maybe we can talk about your next steps.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, it's still scary to think about quitting, but I can definitely talk to my family and think about the medications that'll work best for me.
Okay, great. Well, if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to give me a call.
See you in 2 weeks.
As we can see, the healthcare worker arranges a follow-up meeting with Darian to discuss his progress. It is important to note that she did not just say, "Come back in 2 weeks," and leave it at that. Instead, she provided some guidance about next steps based on their conversation that can help to increase his readiness to quit. In this video, you have seen a healthcare worker use the 5 A's to work with a patient around his tobacco use. The healthcare worker asked him about his use, advised him to quit, assessed him by exploring his readiness to quit, assisted him in creating a plan to address his tobacco use, and arranged a follow-up meeting to talk about his progress. The 5 A's are a quick, effective way to address tobacco use with patients.
She has attempted a quit cold turkey about a year ago and was unsuccessful due to withdrawal symptoms. She has an aunt who was recently diagnosed with lung cancer, which has motivated her to attempt quit smoking again. She's also concerned about how her teeth look. Alright, well for some people, that might be an issue. Okay, so she has come to determine what is the best NRT to help her with her cessation. Alright, so Jordan wants NRT, right? I'm not gonna ask that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Evans, and I think quitting smoking is a journey. For some, it's a short journey full of resilience, but I think for most, it's a long journey, a long affair, if you will, of quitting and relapse. A complicated relationship that can have as much to do with a person's relationship with themselves as with the cigarettes. What starts as a pleasant sensation, an opportunity to rebel, or even to belong, is replaced by less pleasure and a feeling of being trapped. A daily or hourly ride of nicotine withdrawal, and then another cigarette which brings relief. Most teens who smoke think they will quit in their 20s and actually don't till their 40s. Stopping smoking is about making a change, and that is something we're not too good at. When I think of change, I think of 2 concepts, where you are at and the mechanics of how we change. So we should start where you are at. When I started medical school, I thought I could take somebody who smoked and convert them into a non-smoker in one fell swoop. Now I see it differently. I focus on where the person is at. You may be in what we call pre-contemplation, where you're not really even thinking about change. Approximately 75% of smokers want to quit, but 25% are not interested. Maybe you're at the contemplation stage, thinking about it, but not quite ready to act. Next is preparation. This is critical with smoking, especially in the likely event that you've tried to quit before. What has worked in the past and what hasn't? What caused the relapse? Maybe you're at the action stage. This is when you're ready to make your move. There's never a perfect time to quit, and at one point you just have to jump. I'll tell my patients, hey, it's going to be a challenge now, and it's going to be a challenge in 5 years, so why not do it now? And finally, there's the maintenance stage, where you become a non-smoker and are trying to stay that way. When we make changes, it's critical to stop and think, how important is this change to me, and how confident am I in making this change? What we call your self-efficacy. Your job is to be honest. My job is to see if I can move your scores towards 10. The second concept is about the different parts of change. So there's the what. What are we changing? With smoking, I suppose it is straightforward, stopping. But if you think about it, you might be changing lots of things. I think it is like a relationship breakup. You start by just keeping things simple and low risk. You might break up your routine a little bit, avoid certain places, maybe use that juicer every morning to distract yourself. But you will need to change more than your smoking to stop your smoking. The next is the why. Why change? I feel like I could do a 10-minute video just on all the medical reasons why not to smoke, and they are legion, but I'm going to spare you, partly because you already know, partly because you don't need any more guilt, and partly because in clinic I actually spend more time asking people what they like about smoking. Which sounds funny, but I think we have to recognize there are positives, or at least perceived positives, and I think it's important to reframe these perceptions if we are to make a change. So let's run through a few of the common ones. Cigarettes are my friend. They de-stress me. They relax me. I'm not going to deny that you may feel a sense of relief and satisfaction when you have a cigarette, but I see it a bit differently. You have a nicotine addiction. The nicotine in tobacco is highly addictive. Within a few seconds of inhaling, it travels to your brain, causing you to have a temporary high. Over time, your brain changes, causing you to smoke more to get the same effect. We rate your addiction to nicotine with a few simple questions. Do you smoke more than 15 cigarettes a day, or smoke within 30 minutes of getting up in the morning? Do you find it difficult to go more than 4 hours without a smoke? The power of nicotine comes from the repeated small doses you give yourself when you smoke. It may seem innocent at first, but if you take 15 puffs from a cigarette and smoke, say, 20 cigarettes a day, that's 300 drug doses a day. You think smoking relieves your stress or is satisfying, but it actually isn't. The cigarette is just making your nicotine addiction go away. Smoking doesn't make your concentration better. It just calms your nicotine receptors cry for more. Smoking makes your heart beat faster, increases blood pressure and breathing. These are all symptoms of stress, not stress reduction. Let me repeat that. The cigarette just reduces your nicotine stress, not your real stress.
In addition to last year learning about COPD,
I've got a lot of trigger times. Coffee, sex, meals, certain people, break times, telephone calls, the car. There are a lot of triggers you're going to have to prepare for. You got to change your coffee routine, plan something to do right after meals, throw out your car ashtray. I have no advice on sex, but make a plan for breaks or the telephone with lots of distractions. Know that when you have a hunger or caffeine or other types of pangs, you also have a nicotine pang that needs to be satisfied. You have associated these, but they're actually separate. Alcohol and parties double the risk as you have the association, plus you're imbibing something that tends to lower your resolve. I want something in my hand. Yes, you are making maybe 300 hand motions a day. You may need to replace this by chewing gum or chewing on a straw or a cinnamon stick or playing on your cell phone to keep your hands busy to replace this daily habit. I will gain weight. Yes, you might, but I think this is actually more marketing than reality, what I call the Virginia Slims effect. On average, people who quit gain about 2.5 kilograms or 5 pounds. So 2 thoughts on this. Firstly, if this is a concern for you, you might want to focus on strategies that affect calories in and calories out, such as your new daily routines might focus on walking, a special emphasis on being mindful of emotional eating, or that your hand-mouth routine includes carrots or celery sticks. My second point is about perspective. A possible 5 pounds may be important from a vanity perspective, but from my doctor perspective, the health return is spectacularly higher when you stop smoking. Remember, we said smoking was a relationship. Part of the healing of stopping a damaging relationship is starting new healthy relationships. So now is the time to start a deeper relationship with your bicycle or salads or walking or gardening or your supportive friends. Next is the how. What are the skills required to change? How do I change with the emphasis on I? So what works? Well, let's start with willpower. It's a strange word. On the one hand, it permeates behavior change and all the interventions we talk about. It's also a word I don't love as people see it as black and white. If a person succeeds, they have willpower, and if they fail, they have no willpower. The science of willpower in smoking gives a mixed message. Approximately 5% of smokers who try to quit cold turkey achieve prolonged abstinence for 6 to 12 months, with most relapsing in the first 8 days of attempting to quit. On the other hand, most people who quit do so unassisted. Maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of people do so by themselves. Reconciling these two stats reveal the natural history of smoking cessation, that, quote, failures are part of this process and can be seen as dress rehearsals for the eventual success. Another key pearl here is the data which tells us that our perception of the quitting smoking experience is often much darker than reality. In a British study of people who were surveyed about their quit experience, 53% said that it was not at all difficult to stop. 27% said it was fairly difficult, and the remainder found it very difficult. So to summarize, you can do it by yourself, and it may be less difficult than you think. On the other hand, it looks like your chances are better if you layer on some other tactics. So if you fail, try again and think about adding another strategy. Some say there are 2 types of cigarettes, those that are dealing with your nicotine addiction and those that have become part of a routine. So let's see what works for both these types of cigarettes. Let's start with treatments that have not been proven effective. and where you may be wasting your money. Now, some of my patients have found they help, and to be honest, if they stop your smoking, I suppose I don't really care. But under this category, I put laser therapy, acupuncture, and hypnosis. When we compare these treatments to a placebo or just compare them to the quit rates of people on waiting lists, the rates don't appear to be improved. Next is medications to help stop smoking. The data shows that medications, especially when combined with behavioral support, can double your chance of success. Many patients are resistant, which I get, but I also see an irony in the fact that people are willing to inhale chemicals much worse for them, but they won't take a medication for a few weeks or months to stop smoking for the rest of their life. If we use nicotine replacement therapy as an example, it allows people to deal with the addiction of nicotine without having to inhale the other 7,537 chemicals in cigarettes. And that's what I worry about. People die. 2 full 747s of people a week in Canada from smoking, not nicotine. Nicotine replacement therapy comes in multiple forms, and there is usually less nicotine than what you get in a cigarette. You can put on a patch, which is easy and discreet. You can chew gum, although in a different way than you usually chew gum. You can suck on a lozenge, or you can use an inhaler. The patch gives you a nice baseline nicotine level to lower your cravings. The latter three offer the advantage of flexible dosing when you have a nicotine craving, and a familiar routine of opening packages and putting something in your mouth. Important things people need to know about nicotine replacement therapy are, firstly, you can design your own nicotine program. You do not need a prescription. Prefer the patch and then the gum or lozenge or inhaler for breakthrough cravings? Great. Maybe you smoke under 10 cigarettes a day and just want to use the gum when you need it. Your pharmacist can really help here. People get a bit confused with the cost. NRT is generally cheaper than smoking, but you might be buying a month at once. Money-wise, of course, it's a no-brainer. A pack a day is maybe $3,600 a year. Imagine what you would do with that money. Imagine what you would do with 10 years of that savings. Secondly, with nicotine replacement, you can stop cold turkey, or you can wean down your smoking. Taking nicotine and smoking together does not increase your risk of heart attacks. Smoking does. You probably started smoking gradually, and I guess the same can be true of stopping. If you feel you need another month of NRT, then that's fine. I'm not going to go into details of pills for smoking cessation, but I will give you a quick overview of the two most known ones. The first is Zyban or bupropion. This started just as an antidepressant, and then users found their desire for smoking dropped and they were able to quit more easily. Chantix, or Chantix in the US, is varenicline, and it is a newer option that may be even more effective, but also has some side effects that may make it not for everyone. You can discuss these options with your doctor or other healthcare providers. The counseling needs to be individualized. The final approach is the behavioral interventions. I covered some of this ground, but I don't think people realize how many fantastic resources are out there for them. Governments make a lot of money from people who smoke, and they funnel into superb programs. You want a text message, a supportive email, you want expert counseling, want to be connected with other people going through the same thing, or who have just been there, or maybe you just want to talk to someone. Go online, call the helpline, buy the book, get the message. In the first months following quitting, I want you to prepare for the roadblocks of risk and stress. So avoid high-risk situations. You know what they are. You might want to tell the people involved in advance. And I want you to focus on stress reduction. Stressful things are going to happen to you, but you create the stress. Tell people, hey, I'm quitting smoking this month, so what's the least stressful strategy that works? I also get people to think about the 3 A's. Avoid situations you know are stressful for you. Alter expectations. So when you look at your to-do list, be realistic. Manage expectations up front before it's stressful. And the final A is acceptance. If we use driving as an example, traffic jams, bad drivers, and flat tires happen. Take a deep breath, focus on what you can control, and accept what you can't. Now, let's say you quit smoking. That's excellent. You've broken up. So what now? Well, first of all, you're great. Secondly, there's going to be some ups and downs, more ups, especially after you get through the first month, but some of the things to expect with nicotine withdrawal are cravings, and these don't follow a perfect line. Headaches, nervousness, irritability, trouble sleeping, and you may want to eat more, so have some healthy foods ready. And also people tend to have more of a cough as their lungs self-clean. Finally, the Japanese have a proverb that success is falling down 7 times and getting up 8 times. If you get derailed, don't feel guilty. As I said at the beginning, this is a journey. Come back and see us. This is the best thing I can do for you. Don't learn helplessness. Learn about yourself and get ready for the next round. And thanks for listening.
Alright, what's A? Alright, anticipate challenges. And what is R?
Remove tobacco products.
Remove tobacco products, okay? So if you are to counsel someone on smoking cessation, you really do want to make sure that you talk to them about those different points with the STAR acronym. I do it all the time in practice. It's pretty helpful to help people to really remember, especially setting a quit date. I find is probably the most helpful for people is setting that quit date and then all the other stuff. All right. Okay, so all right. So here's what we're gonna do. All right. So you got this. You guys have to give me as a patient, not supposed to give you information.
It was a cloudy Saturday afternoon, and I was about to leave my office when suddenly my bell rings. I open the door and I see a colorful, well-dressed lady, really classy. Melissa, who is a single mother of two and a very successful lawyer, came to me desperate to quit smoking. By the time we met, she had been smoking for 36 years, up to 2.5 packs a day, and she had developed lung cancer because of smoking. And she was on the list for a transplant, but her doctors wouldn't operate on her because she was still smoking. And Melissa had tried to quit with every method out there, from nicotine gums and patches to smoking pills and even vaping. But she couldn't stay away from her cigarettes. Every time she managed to quit for a few weeks, she fell into depression, gained weight, and even had suicidal thoughts. At this point, you might say, how is it possible to have a terminal disease because of smoking and not quit? And let me tell you, Melissa was wondering too. In her first conversation, she told me, I know that every cigarette I smoke brings me closer to death. I don't want to die, but I still smoke. What's wrong with me? So you understand that being in that position, Melissa was afraid of dying, and on top of that, she felt guilty for smoking. But she kept on smoking. Why? Smoking activates the reward areas of your brain, like the nucleus accumbens, that cause you to release feel-good chemicals, like dopamine. So you smoke again and again to replicate the pleasurable effects of dopamine. It's not the nicotine that makes smoking really addictive. It's the instant change it brings to your emotional state. So I asked Melissa, what do you need to feel in your life right now? At first, her face was clouded. She was puzzled. And then she raised her head and looked at me like someone had turned on a switch in her brain. She told me, certainty. And you could see it in her face. Her eyes were wide open. She couldn't believe what she'd said. You see, in the face of the uncertainty of death, smoking was offering her a sense of certainty because she knew she could get an instant fix of pleasure at any time. And all smokers smoke either to boost a good emotional state or to escape from a bad one. When you're stressed, you smoke to relax and feel better. That's an escape. When you're having a drink, you smoke to enjoy your drink even more. That's a boost. In any case, the motive for smoking is to feel good. In fact, that's what all self-destructive behaviors have in common. They're driven by emotions. When you do repeatedly something that hurts you, it's not because you're insane. It's because it gives you an immediate emotional reward. That's why Melissa's need for pleasure was greater than her need to survive. So I thought, if a smoker can feel the same pleasure without smoking, then quitting will be easy. So the question is, how can we stimulate this mental high in non-destructive ways? Professor Martha Burns found that learning something new and exciting activates the same reward areas of the brain as do drugs and gambling. When you have an aha moment, when you hear something inspirational, when you meet someone new, or when you learn something new about yourself, when your consciousness expands in general, your brain releases dopamine and you feel happy. And the most consistent way to feel happy when quitting smoking is by learning something about yourself while quitting smoking. So it is through self-development that we can stimulate dopamine in our brain, so we can literally outgrow our addictions. And after digging deep and modeling the psychology of addiction, me and my team in the smoking cessation formula found the exact mental and behavioral stages that take you through the spectrum of change and cause this mental high of self-development. These stages are the 4Cs system, and I'm going to walk you through them, but I'm going to come back to stage C1 in the end, because it's the most important one, and people tend to forget this stage, so they fail every time. So what is the second C? The source of every transformation is your personal potential. But no transformation can be made if your potential remains potential. So in this stage, you have to cultivate your potential so you can start growing into a non-smoker. And your potential is the sum of your identity, your emotions, and your beliefs. You can't grow if you don't tackle all three elements. Think about it. If you want to change your body and lose 20 pounds, you first have to be able to see the slimmer version of you and identify with it. Then this slimmer version of you has to make you feel good. And third, you have to believe that you can do it. I remember I asked Melissa, "Do you want to quit smoking?" She told me, "Yes, of course." And then I paused, I looked at her, and I asked her again, "Do you believe you can quit smoking?" And she kept staring at me. Because desire manifests in words, but beliefs manifest in behavior. The way you behave around smokers, the way you behave around cigarettes when you're alone, all depend on whether or not you believe you can become a non-smoker. So before you quit, you have to be able to see yourself as a non-smoker. Then the idea of being a non-smoker has to make you feel good. And most importantly, you have to believe that it's possible to quit. Even more, you have to believe that you specifically can quit. The next stage, C3, is where you eliminate your smoking behavior. And to do that, you have to change your smoking pattern. Most smokers think that all they have to do to quit is resist cigarettes with willpower until the desire to smoke fades away. But that's the hard way to quit, because your smoking behavior, which is the action of taking a cigarette, putting it in your mouth, and lighting it up, is just the tip of the iceberg. Every cigarette you light up is preceded by your thought of smoking and your emotional state. Our thoughts affect our emotions, and our emotions affect our behaviors. For example, someone who thinks of themselves as weak, they will feel weak. And if they feel weak, they will show weakness in their behavior. Or someone who thinks of themselves as attractive, they will feel attractive. And when you feel attractive, you behave differently, you hold yourself differently, you speak differently. The same way, having positive thoughts while smoking, like, "I feel so good now," or "so enjoy the cigarette," lead to positive emotions about smoking, and positive emotions about smoking reinforce your smoking behavior. So you will stop picking up a cigarette only when you change how you feel while smoking. And to do that, you first have to change what your mind thinks while smoking. So let's see what happens inside the smoker's mind during a craving. When you're trying to quit, you have an internal dialogue that goes something like that. "I want a cigarette. Don't smoke. But I want a cigarette. But you can't have a cigarette. Don't do it." Now, while having an internal dialogue like that, three things happen. One, the image that preoccupies your mind is that of a cigarette. Two, your thoughts begin and end with the word cigarette, so you will definitely, feel deprived and suffer during a craving if all you think about is that you can't have that cigarette. And if you say to yourself, "Don't smoke," well, that's a problem. because your mind, or better, your unconscious mind, cannot process negatives. Let me explain that thought. Actually, let's do an experiment together. So now, I want you not to think of a pink elephant. No matter what you think, do not think of a pink elephant. No matter what you do, please do not think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. What were you thinking? Of a pink elephant. You see, your mind cannot take negative orders. And I didn't write anything, and I didn't show you any picture of a pink elephant, because I wanted you to see how powerful your thoughts can be, even without visual stimulation. But in case you were wondering, that's how a pink elephant would look like. And the pink elephant principle applies to everything. For instance, what happens when you tell a kid, don't go there, or don't do this? Usually, if not always, do the opposite. Because this is how you create in their mind the urgency to disobey. And you do the same thing to yourself when you want to smoke and you say, don't smoke, or I can't smoke. So to get to my point, you create a feeling of urgency that's overwhelming. You see nothing else, you think of nothing else, and you want nothing else other than smoking. So how do you change your thinking during a craving? The battery that charges our internal dialogue is the words we use. The words create images, the words create thoughts, and the words ultimately define how your mind and body will experience the craving. Imagine dragging your fingernails across a chalkboard. What happened? You didn't touch any chalkboard, yet your thoughts somehow affected your body. The same way, when you say the word cigarette in your inner talk, all your mental processes will revolve around cigarettes, so you will physically experience the craving as more intense. So what you have to do is replace the word cigarette with another one. What works is replacing the word cigarette with air. So instead of thinking, I want a cigarette, think, I want air, I need air, give me some air. You are not going to picture, feel, and do the same things if you use the word cigarette and air. So you will experience your craving in a completely different way. So next time you have a craving, say it out loud, I want air, freedom, popcorn. Seriously, use any word or phrase that resonates with you. For example, Melissa used the names of her children. And the more you practice your craving word, the more vividly and effortlessly it will come to your mind the next time. So I encourage you to try it, because if you know you can control your cravings for a cigarette, you will quit smoking. And you can use the same technique to overcome food cravings, alcohol cravings, and negative thinking. Now the next stage determines if you will relapse. Have you ever learned a new skill, like a foreign language, a musical instrument, or even a card game, and as the time passed without practicing that skill, you totally forgot it? If that has happened to you, it's simply because you didn't condition that skill. Conditioning something you have learned is as important as learning it. So the fourth C is condition your smoke-free life. Because becoming a non-smoker is like any skill. You first have to learn it, and then you have to condition it. That's how you can forget your smoking pattern. And the best way to forget is to replace. So what you have to do this time is replace smoking altogether with a new beneficial and healthy habit. A habit that will help you satisfy the same emotional needs that you used to need by smoking. Melissa chose to replace smoking with journalism, and the process of learning and developing a new skill helped her brain find new means to release dopamine, and it still does. That's how Melissa quit, had a successful surgery, and remains a happy non-smoker up to this day. And now we have one thing left. I told you I'm gonna leave this till the end because all of the previous stages wouldn't mean as much without this. So before doing anything else, you have to choose to quit. Everything starts with a decision. Everything you have ever done that has made you the person you're today is because you made a decision or failed to make one. But even not making a decision about how you want your health and your life to be in the future, then this is a decision too, right? The mistake Melissa was making was putting down the facts and then expecting to feel motivated to quit because it's the logical thing to do. But her logic couldn't overpower the emotional connection she had with smoking. Smoking is an emotional behavior, so the decision to quit should also be emotional. And it was when Melissa focused only on how her death would affect her children that she was able to get leverage on herself and choose to change. And you, have you ever said about anything, that's it, I've had enough, this has to change? In your family, in your relationships, in your career, anywhere. And immediately you stepped up and did things you never thought you could. You see, the problem is not that you are too weak, too stuck, or too addicted. The problem is that you have never used your emotions to make a real firm decision to change. And if you choose, then cultivate, change, and then condition, you will see yourself transforming before your eyes. And I'm telling you this because no matter where you live, what lifestyle you have, or how long you've been smoking, overeating, drinking, or holding your true self back in any way, the 4C's self-development system works because the psychology of addiction works under the same principles for all humans. And you are greater than your addiction. Thank you.
No drug allergies. I'll just give you vitals in case you want it. I'm 210 pounds, I'm 6'1". Blood pressure is 130.
So I love smoking. And I know I'm not alone in this. It's been part of civilization, it's been part of human existence since about 5000 BC. It's so popular, in fact, that 1 billion people do this every day.
35.
During the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, we created something, this icon, this white stick that we called a cigarette, and it became the most successful consumer product of all time. And that idea of burning sticks and inhaling them hasn't really changed a lot in centuries. But that's changing now, and there's kind of a revolution happening in the tobacco space. That's something we should all be really excited about. But it's also something that we may not inherently recognize. But shifting back to the success of those products, success doesn't always come without its detriments, and clearly, in the case of smoking, that is the case. According to the CDC, smoking is the leading cause of preventable death in the United States every year. It counts for, smoking-related illnesses account for about 1 in 5 deaths annually in the US, and globally, smoking is responsible for about 5 million deaths every year. On average, people who smoke will live for about 10 years shorter than non-smokers, and those are really startling statistics. So back at Stanford, my friend Adam and I, we were studying product design, and we had this great place, this amazing place on campus called the Product Design Loft. And we got to hide out behind there, and we would smoke cigarettes, and we would look at each other, and we would ask each other why we were being quite so stupid. I mean, after all, we're smart people, what are we doing? And And it's not for no reason. I mean, Stanford is a smart place. There's lots of smart people. The idea of walking around campus with a burning stick in your mouth, you're going to be judged. You're going to be stigmatized, and for good reason, because the smoking paradigm is stigmatized because it's dangerous. But it's not all bad.
Smoking 2 packs a day.
On the flip side of the coin, smoking is also sexy. So let's say Marilyn Monroe and her cigarette holder, or James Dean, who was cool as hell. Or just think about the presence and the intellect of Albert Einstein with his pipe, or the political aspirations of Winston Churchill that you can just tell through his personality. Smoking exudes personality. And the two things that I've just laid out are two very stigmatized, polarized camps on the smoking space. On the one side, it's a beautiful thing that connects us to our past. And on the other side, it is a dangerous drug delivery system. And for that reason, maybe smoking is the manifestation of the human condition. I mean, after all, life is both a beautiful and an intrinsically tragic thing. And smoking is both of those things as well. And that is not for us alone. This idea of luxury, of a reflection of who we are, is something that everyone should be able to access if they choose. So I want you to think about, for a second, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure most of you learned about this in grade school, right? So it's a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid are simple things. You need air to breathe, and you need food to eat, and you need clean drinking water, and things like that. At the top of the pyramid are things like yachts, let's say. You don't need a yacht, but you might want a yacht. And that's not what's actually at the top, it's self-actualization, but that's besides the point. It would be easy to pin smoking, cigarettes in particular, as being something that should exist near the top of Maslow's hierarchy. Something that we choose to have, but we absolutely don't have to have. But I would argue that it exists much lower on that hierarchy. Once you have these simple goods, when you're a third world nation developing and you're following the path that most countries follow eventually, one of the first goods that winds up being imported, in fact, I would argue the quintessential luxury good that gets imported into those countries and beloved by the people that are there, are cigarettes. And why is that? I mean, those products are accessible luxury goods, and they represent choice. They are one of the first things that we get to have that we can enjoy anytime, anywhere we want. They're fairly cheap, and they give us some time to ourselves to have. So why is it, if we understand this, if we understand that there's a need for these kinds of products, if there's a need for something that addresses the core needs of people, why is it that we haven't created that product yet? After all, isn't the safe cigarette the golden goose for the tobacco industry? Well, it would be very easy to argue, and I don't disagree, that it's technically difficult, that it is perhaps practically impossible to create a safe cigarette. But in reality, it's more complicated than that, because tobacco companies have created their own worst enemy. The cigarette, the white stick iconography, and the ritual that is associated with it is a yardstick that all of you know. And it's something that you have a firm set of expectations around. So to introduce something that preserves that iconography and doesn't deliver on it is to set yourself up for failure. And tobacco companies aren't the only people that aren't the only groups that have been trying to innovate in this space. So think about pharmaceutical companies. We've got nicotine gum and lozenges and the patch and even cream that you put on your hands that has nicotine in it. But none of these things are even addressing the core consumer need. These are products designed for abstinence. They're trying to get us to allow us to stop doing something that inherently we love to some degree. And that's a problem, because the idea that you can prescribe a solution to a desirable good is wrong. The idea that prescription is somehow going to lead to desire is totally false. Prescription doesn't lead to desire, and desire is the heart of a luxury good or experience. It's very easy, then, to focus on the other camp, because these stigmas that are created around a difficult issue are easy to point fingers at. They exist at the extremes because they are extreme ideas. So instead of concentrating on the consumer and what the consumer needs, we more easily focus on the opposite opinion. And we can do that a lot. This is something that's very common for us, and I want to give you an example. In the late 1970s, there's a scientist named Bruce Alexander who did a study on rats. Rats have a difficult existence. They exist very, very much at the bottom end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're scurrying around just trying to get food and drinking water and just to perpetuate their life cycle. And in the lab, it's not terribly different. I mean, lab rats typically live in very small, confined cages, and they don't have a lot to live for. So Alexander challenged the notion that all experimental results on lab rats couldn't be somehow linked to their environment. So he created a bigger cage. Simple. And he called it Rat Park. And Rat Park is exactly as it sounds. It was a utopian rat existence. The rats could kind of scurry around, and they had plenty of food and water and areas to run and nest, and they all lived together. And we knew it's well known from experimental results, not only with rats, but with apes as well, that when you give these animals what we would typically call an addictive substance, and I'll use the example of morphine, for example, that's what Alexander used. Oftentimes, the rats will dose themselves on the morphine so much that they'll actually die. But in Rat Park, something amazing happened. See, these rats, they had a little cage, they had this wonderful big cage, but in the back corner they had this little alleyway, this dark alleyway, that only one rat could go down at a time. This was very similar in a way to the hideout that Adam and I had at Stanford, where we'd go and smoke cigarettes. But at the end of this alleyway, there were two bottles that the rats could choose from. One had clean drinking water, and the other had a morphine solution. And the little rats would take their little rat paws and they'd choose which little rat lever they want to select. And the rats in Rat Park would just select the drinking water. You could fool the rats into drinking the morphine by adding sugar. But when you added a chemical that would block the effects of the morphine on rats, they would keep drinking it. It was, in fact, the sugar that they were after. The rats just had something better to do now. They could run around and be free with their little rat friends and not worry about getting high all the time. And this was an amazing experimental result. I mean, remember, this was the late 1970s, but it was late 1970s. In 1971, Richard Nixon had already declared the war on drugs. We had labeled drugs bad. And it appeared for the moment that stigma had triumphed over insight. Over the next 4 decades, we would incarcerate 4 times as many Americans as we ever had previously. So let me take a step back. A few years ago, I had the privilege of being a fellow at a place called the D School on Stanford's campus. We did something very simple there. We taught a concept called design thinking. Design thinking is purely just empathy. You try to understand a person's needs,
You guys.
and then you test and see if you got it right
13.
by creating prototypes. And you do that cheaply and quickly, and you do it over and over again, and you test and see if it works. And that concept, combined with the confidence to actually use it, is an amazing power. It's a very powerful tool for change. Adam and I, we took that skill set, we took that idea, we looked inwards at ourselves, hiding out behind this loft, and what we realized was that it isn't smoking that we love. I lied to you when I first came on stage. It isn't the smoking that I love. In fact, I would challenge any of you who smoke, I would say it isn't smoking that you love. It's the things that smoking does for you. It is the sharing that you have, the sharing moments, giving something to someone, receiving it from them, taking a break from your day, taking the time just to breathe, and just having a friend in your pocket. Those are the things that really matter. And when we understand that it's the heart of a consumer product or experience that we really want to get to, we can deconstruct the stigma, we can ignore the stigma, we can deconstruct the problem, and we can focus on the consumer. And what that will allow us to do is create entire new paradigms for a solution. Instead of lobbing ideas over the consumer and targeting the other person, we can actually look at what people want. And there's a renaissance, as I mentioned, happening in the tobacco industry right now. Awesome. It's about time. Things like vaporizers and electronic cigarettes are changing the landscape of the industry. And that's not necessarily on purpose, but it's happening. And the thing that we should note is not that these products are perfect, but because many of them by no means are perfect. In fact, electronic cigarettes in ways are almost comical interpretations of this icon that we love. But the point is that that design thinking process is being implemented, that we are going down the path of reinventing a problem that exists so broadly that we can improve the lives of 1 billion people. We should all be really excited about that. And there's a lot more coming. We can preserve both the wonder and the elegance of cigarette smoking, but we can abandon the stigma that's come before it. More so on that process, your phone, for example, I would say, is already outdated, but you're just not going to care. When you turn that thing in, you're not going to care, because somewhere, probably in California, some kid has already invented the next thing that you're going to care about. Let's say it's that your phone calls Santa Claus, and Santa grants wishes much better than Siri. You will be really happy to turn that phone in. There's always going to be a desire to return to this idea of stigma, of labeling the opposite side, of creating a more extreme version of a conversation. But if we understand that there is no end to the future, there is no end, there is no perfect existence, then we can take one step further and we can acknowledge that there's also no end to the need for design thinking. There's no end to the need for empathy. And when we can embrace that, we can change things, but not just smoking, but in other entire industries yet to come. And we can do that every day. Thanks.
And you also said that, okay, I think, but you said like his current medication is at too low of a dose, or
Yeah, I'm the doctor and I'm here to save you.
low intensity statin, right?
No, I'm not.
10th is not low intensity.
What I'm here to do is to fill the survival void a little differently than you've been doing for a long time. Not everybody, but lots of you are filling that survival void with what we call false fixes. And that is, you know what I'm talking about. I'll give you a hint, it's not apples and kale. When things get a little tough out there, it's usually that national menage a trois, especially for women, late at night, you, Ben, and Jerry. And who was it who told us that a pint of ice cream has 4 servings in it? No, 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 no. Law and Order Marathon, perimenopause, a rotten day, 1 serving. And there you have it, anesthetized, ready for another day. Sound familiar? So what I'm going to do is describe the problem and prescribe a little bit of a brand new solution based upon hot new science that most of you may never have heard about before. A twist on survival. Well, you know how it goes. All of the false fixes we're used to in life. I look specifically at that wine bottle and I think about this brand new Facebook that has an amazing following of 1,000 women. And it's called, I need a glass of wine or I'm going to sell my children. Do you think we have a problem here? And look at everything else we do. You see, you live an addictive lifestyle and you don't even know it. It's addictive-like behaviors that happen throughout the day. Any question about this, just give up one of those behaviors and see how it feels. You know how it feels. Staring at screens. What about getting to work at 5 in the morning and leaving at midnight? Anything wrong with that? What happened to eating? And what do you eat? And do you sleep at all? We're going to get into that. These are what we call false fixes. Oh, sure, they fix, sort of, for a short period of time, and then they boomerang right back in your face. So, as we're thinking about this, what I'd like to do is take you on a journey. Mind, mouth, and muscle. I want to go deep, and I want to show you a little bit more about these false fixes that you may not be aware of at all. We're going to start with the mind. Ah, the mind. Well, it's very important. You laugh? This is highly scientific. Now listen up. Men, left hemisphere, task-oriented. Honey, you're either on or off. Women, we're complicated. We have many knobs. That's because we work off 2 hemispheres. We have more connections between hemispheres. We spend money differently. Men spend more money on entertainment and basically period than we do. What do they spend it on? Booze, women, shoes, and caregiving. Helping ourselves and everyone who comes within 100 feet of us, even if we don't know them. We're caregiving them. We're eternal caregivers to our own detriment. So keep that context in mind as we push forward. Now, I told you that you most probably have addictive-like behaviors and you don't even know it. You don't even know it. You're filling that void with this. I'm going to show you something that you've probably never seen before. Now, what you're actually going to see is a PET scan, and this PET scan is extraordinary. You have a normal brain. There's one left in the United States, but we use it a lot in these experiments. And what you see up there is red-orange, the red-orange of the reward center. Now, the reward center lights up normally when dopamine, that fantastic, lustful pleasure neurotransmitter, links up with the dopamine receptors. That's what it's supposed to look like. Look at the other brains. It could be anything that you do. Yes, it's not just substance abuse, it's everything abuse. Food addiction actually is real. We actually have addictive-like habits around foods. Surprisingly, it's not kale. This is usually hyperpalatables like sugary, fatty, salty foods. But they do a number on your brain. You see, it's not a black box anymore. We can peer in there with scans, and what we see is we see actual damage to the reward center. Is it reversible? Absolutely, and you know exactly what you need to do. I don't have to tell you that. It's a keen grasp of the obvious. Now, let me tell you more. Did you know that sugar is more addictive than cocaine? As refined sugar. Lately, there was a study on Oreos that you might have heard about. And actually, I did a nice little piece on this, and it was fabulous. And what it was they took rats and they injected them with morphine, and they injected them with cocaine, and then they offered them an Oreo. You'll just never guess what happened. What we were measuring was one particular gene in the reward center of the brain. We wanted to see whether or not the Oreo caused the same changes as morphine and cocaine. Guess what happened? What do you think happened? It's the same thing and even worse. Do you know the rats bagged the morphine and the cocaine and went right for the filling? Just like you and I have done for years. Sort of a metaphor, isn't it? They literally, we watched them, we have videos of this, ripping the cookie apart and going for the filling. Yeah. Brings back great memories. And then more and more and more. What's going on? Let's look at the next part of the brain that gets hammered with all of this. As we're describing this problem, we're looking at the prefrontal cortex, or the smarty pants part of the brain, or on Wall Street, where the executive function hangs out. Tap your forehead. It's right behind there. Now, when you're living an addictive-like lifestyle with addictive-like behaviors, guess what happens? What we notice in that scan is that the ability of the brain to be able to muster up all of the wonderful skills that you see in the prefrontal cortex, which are organizing, strategizing, staying vigilant, being mindful, reining in impulsivity, impatience, and irritability. Guess what ends up happening? You can't do it anymore. It gets hammered, it gets impaired, and you're out. End of story. Not so good. What else hammers this? Stress. There's a reason why stressed, spelled backwards, is desserts. Think about that. Stress absolutely impairs this entire part of the brain. At the same time, sleep does. What about Z's? Z's, please? People walk around being very proud of the fact they just got 4 hours of sleep. Really? Do you want a belly that extends from here to the next state? That's a great way to do it. Don't have enough sleep. Not enough growth hormone on board when you sleep at nighttime, when you're impaired this way. You have too much stress hormone, big belly, there you have it. And that big belly is full of increased incidence of disease, morbidity, and mortality. Who the hell needs this? We got to clean this up. So let's go to the body if we're going to clean this up. You've probably never ever heard of sitting disease. Google it sometimes. Mayo Clinic tells you that if you sit for too long, that you increase your risk for heart disease, and more importantly, metabolically, you glacierize. You can't move your blood sugar. Actually, I'm a physician. This is killing me. I want everyone to stand up. Everyone stand up. Oh, doesn't that feel better? I'm saving your life. Now, if you really want to get something out of this, high five the guy next to you. Didn't that feel good? Sit down. Your genes are absolutely flipping with happiness. And at the same time, I just helped save your life. Are you happy? Good. Let's move it along. Now, I know most of the guys in the room are staring at this saying, yeah, that's me. Women, of course, are laughing very heartily. Now, I told you I'd go deep inside you, mind, mouth, muscle. Let's go into the belly. That's what his belly looks like if I cut him like a salami, and that's a CAT scan. See the white in there? You'll only see this in research. This is from our laboratory. That's fat. Not a whole lot of it. What happens, however, when you fall asleep at the meal? Even Michelangelo packed on a few, right? This is what it looks like. What you actually see is way too much fat. Is this reversible? Absolutely. The guy's swimming in it right now. And obviously, this is not the way to go. False fixes lead to this, a life of false fixes. Here's the solution. How many of you ever heard about epigenetics? Epigenetics is the hottest new science. If you don't know it now, then make certain you know at some point. What this is so straightforward. I'm going to go right down to the gene. I'm going to show you how easy this is. Now, for the longest period of time, we thought you were stuck with your DNA. Whatever you're born with, honey, that was your destiny. That's not the way it works anymore. Instead, what we have is a brand new science that says every single thought you have, every single mouthful of whatever you're eating, and every single step you take changes gene expression, changes the way the whole body is talking to itself, and changes your destiny. That's right, you write your own life script. So let's see the birth of epigenetics. Very simple. We took a mouse that was basically condemned to death. It had the agouti gene deep inside it. And this agouti gene basically made it fat, floppy, yellow, because there was a color of the fur thing linked in with the agouti gene. It died of every single disease very early. What we decided to do was just something fun. We fed it greens. That's right, Mom was right. And the greens you didn't know have something called a methyl donor, just a little side chain. You pick them up every single time you have greens and good whole foods, at the same time when you do physical activity, at the same time when you meditate. The same thing is happening. You're changing gene expression. So they went ahead and fed the mice this. And then they had babies. And the babies were born lean, mean fighting machines with green. We never knew this. This was 2007, which is why you've probably never heard of it. Now it's the hottest new science. Now when you go to the produce section of the grocery store, you don't look for greens. You're cool, because greens are so last year. Instead, what you actually say, you say, I'm going to score some methyl donors. I'm going to methylate my genes. I'm going to change their expression. You'll be way ahead of the curve. This is what a human being looks like when they've been methylated. Betty Lou Sweeney, 250 pounds, 68 years old, 26 medications, and half dead. And then she got the big clue. I call it an epiphany. When she was stuck in an ICU, half dead. And this is what she ended up doing. What she ended up doing was turning it all around. She fought her food addiction. She fought every single addictive practice she had. She slugged it out. It took her 2-3 years. And guess what she ended up doing? Ending up in the Guinness Book of World Records for holding the longest plank. That's right, it's 36 minutes. Most of us can't make it beyond what? And you don't even know what a plank is. Okay, I'm good. And lest I forget as I wrap this up, all right? We need mentors. We need to know now that we can take this on to generation after generation. We feel so good when we put mind, mouth, and muscle together, when we change gene expression, when we go epigenetic. But there's one other piece of this too. God, you feel really good too. I met this happy camper at the Senior Olympics, 93 years old, on the track and field when I was covering this for television. And he taught me one other thing that you can't forget. He stalked me for 3 hours. He didn't know he was 93. He thought he was 23. Just showing you that when you go epigenetic, when you fill the void with healthy fixes, everything is looking up. So epigenetic transformation, and do remember the last lesson. The real wealth is health. Thank you.
No, I was asking to.
Oh, we have to be one.
Because there's 2 patients. Do you want to be patient 1 or patient 2?
I'll be patient 1.
I'm assuming that I'm allowed to have all this love, right?
I don't see why not.
Since I'm in
Because you get to change stuff if you're a smoker. Yeah.
So the hero's journey is all about transformation, isn't it? We're transforming throughout the entire journey, whether it's departure, initiation, or return. You know, it's interesting, in initiation, which is what I'm talking about, Joseph Campbell made it very clear. It's war out there. It's hell.
Put it like this.
And you need to be armed with everything you can possibly find to be able to get through it day by day, minute by minute, nanosecond by nanosecond. Now, transformation you've heard about, be mental, psychological, spiritual.
No, not really.
But I'm going to teach you. I'm going to guide you through a brand new kind of transformation based upon a science that's so exciting that has blown the minds of people like myself, a physician and a scientist, and all my colleagues. Now I'm going to blow your mind. Are you ready?
I'm here to quit.
Have you ever heard of epigenetics?
On a scale of 1 to 10,
Raise
how
your
willing are
hand.
you to quit right now, sir?
Okay, very good. Excellent. Have you had your tail today?
I was saying about
Soon you'll understand why.
I ain't gonna
This
quit.
is such
You're not going to quit.
It never worked before.
an epigenetic
What have you
transformation.
tried before, sir?
A tail.
Yes, considering your history.
Ready?
Well, I tried smoking that weed.
Well,
Maybe
made
the
it very
weed.
simple.
And I really didn't work for
First,
a
we
while.
start
And then
with this.
I lost my
I
dealer,
was taught,
and then I had to
and
go
I'm
back
going
to
to teach you
cigarettes.
my journey too. Share it with you.
So you're
That you are what you
pack
eat.
per week.
Oh wait, negative one
Heard
was
this?
that. Never
Not
mind.
Of
just
course, you are what you eat. So, you know,
sorry,
out there,
you're lying to me.
sometimes it
Oh
works.
man, it's a dream I had.
It used to be one
Sometimes it
pack
doesn't.
per day. So weird.
I
Well, what
try.
made
Oh, I've
you
been
go
doing
from
this.
So
What made you
I try
go
to
from
live
one
a
pack
very
a
healthy
day to
lifestyle.
one pack per
There's my
week?
armpit picture. I am a triathlete. Like to get out there and kind of, get outdoors any excuse I
My
can.
doctor said
No matter what it looks like when I do it,
My
I
wife.
do it. I have fun.
My wife yelled at me.
The same thing goes with
Yeah, it
the
looks
food.
like you're divorced,
Lots of
sir.
colors.
That's why we got divorced.
Tell me what to do. I do it. It's exactly what I love to do. Right?
What do you,
Did you
what
do
do
that
you do?
too?
What do you do?
I don't know, but I'm retired.
You're retired.
I used to be a carpenter.
Okay.
The silly grail all along was DNA was your destiny. And quite frankly, genes control you.
Predbar.
So you are what you are. Whatever you got, you were born, you're stuck with.
Oh, okay.
And that's it. A little proclivity toward
overdoing
obesity,
that.
toward diabetes,
overdoing
heart
that.
disease. You're in trouble. Right?
Oh wait, no.
Well, what could you do about it? Well, you kind of just keep remembering, I am what I eat, I try to do the best I can, but as scientists, we never knew where any of this was going. We had some conversations, studies, back and forth. What was really happening in that black box? And then all hell broke out in 2007.
I don't know shit.
Well, it looks like you're taking a bunch of medications here.
That all great science happens.
May be the consequence of
You
these
sit down, you this and figure this out right off the bat. We're just screwing around in the lab just trying to figure out fun things to do. And then one day, something wild and crazy happens. Dr. Randy Journal at Duke University one day was playing around with some people
hypertension,
now, agouti mice have a agouti gene.
you had a heart attack at one point in time. You had a
Now, this gene basically condemns him to
Yeah,
a
buddy,
life
after my first heart attack,
obese, fluffy,
my wife gave me a heart attack. I couldn't hold myself. I'm gonna quit smoking.
Let me ask
and you
you,
die
are
early
you,
of all the usual suspects. Heart disease,
so you're not willing
diabetes,
to quit? You're at a 3, you said?
not a good life, right?
Five, but I call
So
it
one day
two.
he was saying,
5? What can
I
I,
know this
what
gene
can
is
I
no
do?
good.
What can you
And I
do
also
to
know that
change
there's
that
funny
to like
little
a
things called
good old
methylphenidate,
7 or 8?
side chains.
Make them
That
cigarettes,
we can,
not kill me.
sometimes
Have
play
you
with
ever
here
tried to
that
bake?
might just do something with this gene. I don't know. Oh, what's the worst that can happen?
It's
So how do we give these things
Where's
up
this
to
More than
mice?
1%.
Nothing donuts.
They
You
don't
guessed
wanna
it. It's the green stuff.
give you other options besides quitting.
So he fed them
Because not much research
all the
has
greens
been
he could
done.
in the form of
Sure, they don't know long-term
folate and
effects like
vitamins, blue greens, and stuff. I don't know what it's all here. And he fed the mothers who were going to become pregnant.
Yeah, they don't know
And
how
then he
it
sat
affects the
around
lung
and he thought, well,
Not the
I wonder what's
nicotine.
going to happen. You see, we scientists have no push in life. So we sit around looking at cages waiting for
have you ever
mice to
thought
be
about
born.
trying
This is what we do on Friday nights. Right? So he's sitting there like this with the whole team going, okay, let's pop one of those little babes
Judging
out.
by
and see
how
what it
many
looks
years you've
like.
been smoking, I would
Son,
say
what have you done?
try an e-cig because you don't want to
Only
just
eating
quit
greens
cold turkey because I
that
feel
might
like
produce
Can I get lit
a
on
baby
that?
that was
yeah, you can absolutely get lit. Try a
brown.
lot. Have you ever tried lozenges? I heard you get a good buzz for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I love that shit. Where do I get that?
Eating your greens.
Go to
Well, needless to
Walmart.
say, this was published and this absolutely ripped apart the entire
Born during Woodstock, sir?
What? This is heresy. DNA is not destiny? No. As it turns out,
I'm 66,
everything you
Roger.
do with your
I'm
whole
here
life
for 7 years.
is now your destiny. Everything from eating to thoughts that you
So, why are you taking the brand name of Metformin?
is messing with you. Look at this.
Do you have a lot of money? Did you make a lot of money?
Yeah, but I'm retired.
It looks like you're taking like the most expensive medication since
I was a drug dealer. I was a drug lord.
I'm sure they're good.
It looks like right now you do have
Maybe this is going to go away.
Yeah,
There it is. And you can see all the nutrients.
What's that mean?
It means you might die.
And one of the things
Oh,
we found out
God.
was
We're gonna need to put you on
everything from my fat cell distribution to how many I have, I can reverse it. So if I got born with something that was a little funky, I can dampen that down. Did you know that if you were born with the most lethal form of the obesity gene, FTO gene, that by doing something as simple as taking a walk every day,
everything's brand name.
over the course of 6 months, you dampen it.
Beta blocker?
Add that, add a little tail to it.
Well, you know,
And then what happens? Wow, you're way over 50%.
So how much do you have to pay your wife?
This is good. Every single thing.
nah, they grown. They over 18. They ain't got me nothing.
Are you
Cigarettes.
depressed?
Hell no.
You're always happy?
Yeah, buddy.
Because what happens
A1C
is,
is
over the course of 2 to 3 years, we have counted over
diabetes.
1,000 different genetic mutations that come
I'm gonna go copy a monster when I get
variations
home.
on your gene expression.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
A great idea, given all my
What
conditions.
What do you do? Think about this. Well, let's go down to the gene level.
Oh, I didn't
When
see
you
all
go to
this.
the actual gene level, what do you see?
Oh, I did
You
see
see the
this.
gene sitting there, nothing's
I
going
said
on
I
with
tried
the
to
gene.
quit
Just
after
sitting
my
there,
first
lots
heart
of
attack. My weak
potential.
walk gave me a heart attack.
Little histones hang around. They're
it
little
didn't work.
proteins. And they basically monitor what's going on. They play with the volume on this whole thing. And they basically, what are you doing? You're eating a
buddy,
what?
how'd you know?
That's a ho-ho.
Yeah.
That's not food, that's a science fair
Your
project.
allergies are Norco, so what do you
I
take?
can't believe you just put that in your mouth. Okay, fine, sucker. And then, all of a
I
sudden,
don't feel
it speaks to the
pain.
rest of the body from that gene that's involved
See
in
like Tylenol 3.
I'm too tough
Here
for
comes
pain.
It's just a mess.
It literally takes nothing for me.
She ate an apple. Yay! And the histones are all having little orgasms and they're all happy and everything. And then they, whoa!
Aspirin?
Do you not drink?
And then you augment the
Hold on.
function.
Give me
aspirin.
aspirin.
Aspirin takes
You fill your body with flooding nutrients.
Alright.
And that's the way to go. Once
So
you're
how
born
do you
with the addictive
guys
gene, you can dampen
feel
it, you can
now
quiet it
compared to
by
last year? About the
every
same level of
mouthful that
comfort
you
with
take,
motivational
every
interviewing?
step that you take with physical
So this is
movement, for
confusing,
instance.
or you feel
And
now
also,
that a year has
please,
passed,
whatever you do, don't forget the
stuff, is it
brain.
easier to
Every
do?
thought you
What is
have.
the worst
Right now,
stuff, I
every
guess,
single one of you, I'm here as a physician to save your
feedback you
lives.
have about
Don't you just love that? I love saying that. Makes me feel so. Well, anyway, I digress. So what I'd like you to do right now is I want to save your life a little bit. I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want you to say, "You are so cool," and give them a high five right now.
Me personally.
All right. Okay, we're done. Now,
Made it easier to talk.
in those few seconds while you were high-fiving somebody,
We've seen this smoking cessation
Get your hands
several
off
times
her.
now, and so I'm more comfortable with the
Okay.
what you were doing was actually
Any other
changing
responses?
gene expression. Because you see you laughing right now, I'm helping save your life. Why?
Okay.
Research shows
So,
that you have a choice. You can either laugh
like beat this
or be in
topic to death
despair.
by
You
now,
cannot do
but
both
it
at
is
the
very
same time
important. So
because the brain
just
doesn't
really
work
think
that way.
about practice.
So I'm
What
keeping you over
questions
here
you have
instead of over
about,
there. Are you
thinking
enjoying
about
yourself?
Rockrow, or
Wonderful. I'm
me, or
thrilled.
I went over
Okay.
today before we dismissed?
Now,
Cool questions.
just want to drill it
Right.
home again.
What went well
DNA
in
is
class
not destiny.
today?
This is brand new. This is so exciting and so empowering. It's kind of scary too, isn't it? Because when you think about it, every single thought, every mouthful, every single movement that you
Yes.
take changes gene expression.
Patient
Remember
cases.
those histones? They're scoping right now. Alters your destiny and transforms the mind-body. What's not to love?
Alright,
So
what can be improved
instead of you are
for,
what
next year or future class,
you eat,
raise your hand.
you are what your parents ate? Well, that's what this research showed. So, wait a minnet now.
All right,
My
well, thanks,
journey,
guys.
I had to think about this for a
Next
second.
time.
Maybe give
No
us the
comment
assessment.
about
Oh, wait,
that.
oh.
I was helpless. Now, there's my mom and my dad. The good news is they ate well. So I'm looking pretty good in the neighborhood.